Alright, you guys, welcome back to Little Man, Big Conversations. Man, I've had a cavalcade of guests on this podcast thus far. Some that I met during my time, some that I've met in my later years of wrestling. But hey, this guy was there from day one. He was the first person to acknowledge me for what I did in that ring, using the phrase, "That is the greatest thing I've ever witnessed." Now, I've gone on since then, and maybe I've achieved such greatness since then, but maybe that was the peak of my career. Who knows? Only one man knows, and he's here today. He's my friend. He's my brother. I'm close to almost knowing this guy for pretty much close to 12 years. We did work in the ring. We did work outside the ring with the Late Nite Show with my guest today, Scott Black. Scott, how are you, man?
I'm just staggering from your use of the word cavalcade. So very impressed with your vocabulary. I'm good, man. How are you?
It was my word of the day. Yeah.
I'm looking at the calendar right now. Tomorrow's is disingenuous.
And afterwards, snake. Yeah, I'm doing great, man. All things considered, it's a crazy, crazy time on here, but I know you're a busy, busy man these days, so I really appreciate you coming on here and sparing some time to take a trip down memory lane.
Hey, anything, everything outside of a kidney. I mean, I can give you a kidney, but just don't ask me where I get it.
Hey, man, I'm one short. Two would not be so bad. Man, as I referenced at the top of this episode, you were there at day one. I wore that gigantic red jumper. I did that comedy dance-off segment, and that's a shoot. That's a quote. You got up from the desk and you said, "Man, that is the greatest thing I've ever witnessed," and you gave me a standing ovation. Man,
yeah. Well, as it was back in the day at Impact, there wasn't a lot of notes as a commentator. So I was doing commentary at the time because I had hurt myself. I had broken my back and needed to take a long time off. And then when I did kind of come back into the world of wrestling, I came back into the announcing side because Pete always liked me on the mic. And I didn't know if I could still go anyway. So I was like, yeah, I'll do this commentator thing. So yeah, when you showed up as a commentator, you were given a sheet of paper that said the sponsors and then list of the matches, and that was it. And I remember they were saying a section, it was like dance off. And I went, oh, this is interesting. I've never commentated a dance off before, but let's see how this goes. And then, I just see this at what I thought was a kid at the time, and who was introduced as a kid. And get in there and do this friggin' Michael Jackson dance. And I was expecting, the time periods are a bit off. I was expecting essentially the time of like the friggin' floss and, a couple of little, Fortnite-like dances, nothing in particular. So when you actually knocked off this dance, I was like, holy shit. I was like, and it was great. And I guess, I'm thinking you were a kid. Obviously, when I found your story afterwards, I was even more impressed. But thinking at the time, I think the way they said it to me was like it was a 10-year-old kid that was coming in to do this thing. And my eyesight's not great anyway, so I couldn't see your face where I was. And so I was like, oh, okay. And then to see this, I was like, Jesus Christ, all right, that's pretty good. So getting up and giving you the standing ovation because it was pretty great.
Man, it was a weird sensation. I didn't think that turn of events would lead to me being in wrestling. I joined up, I think the next week. I joined up with Blaze, and I always envisioned myself as doing the managerial side of things. It wasn't until 2 months later where I actually had my in-ring debut. Blaze had got injured. I decided to jump in there and fill in the void. He was at ringside. But, you were always at that commentary desk up until about, I think, pretty much, I want to say mid-2009.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, and you were there during the times when I started doing all those impressions. I remember, I think I still have footage of, I came out and impersonated The Rock one show. I did Undertaker.
Austin.
Yes, did Austin. And hell, even at one time, you and I sort of paid tribute to D-Generation X at a couple of shows. But so that
I remember seeing you do them, and I kind of went, all right, this is cute, but I knew And at that stage, you and I had started to get to know each other personally anyway.
Right. Yeah.
And I kind of kept going, like Pete kept going, oh yeah, he's going to come out, he's going to do Undertaker this show. And I kind of went, I've never been a huge fan of like tribute acts. Mm-hmm. and I was like, I just knew you had a much better personality. And again, wrestling is in a classic world. Wrestling is the best gimmicks are your personality turned up to 11.
Yeah, 100%.
And so seeing you come out and doing Austin and doing Taker, it was great for a cheap pulp. It was great for the kids in the audience and stuff like that. Well, some of the kids who actually knew who the characters were, because at that time, even then, Austin hadn't been wrestling for 10 years or something.
Yeah.
And so to come out and do Austin in front of 9-year-olds, they're like, why is this guy drinking quote unquote beer and giving everyone the finger? The Undertaker one, I stood out because obviously you couldn't be more of a polar opposite of the Undertaker.
Yeah, hair color.
Yeah, hair color is all you both dyed your hair a lot too, so that's probably the only similarities. But it was cool. But I kind of I knew there was more to you. I knew there was more that you could bring by being yourself. So I kept pushing Pete in the back. He's like, next week I might get him to do one of the old. I'm like, just let him be him, man. And eventually, when you started coming out as Flashman, that was when that I thought that's when you hit your stride, because it was so much better than just stealing someone. It's easy to steal someone else's gimmick. It's hard to do your own thing.
Yeah, because I completely agree. Looking back on it now, the only reason I was doing those impressions back then was because I didn't really feel, and some people may argue this today, and to them I say thanks very much, but I didn't really feel back then that I had a place in that ring. I never envisioned myself wrestling. I knew that I wanted to manage my friend, because that is what we'd always spoke about during high school. And then when the impressions caught on and the crowd sort of was into it, the idea came about at training where it was like, can you do any more of them? And I thought, well, yeah, I've got a count on one hand list, the ones that I sort of feel confident with. And I remember the guys of Ash and Sweet Assassin and obviously Hawk as well were very much into the concept, because, hey, it's this guy that's pretty much a quarter or half the size of these guys going out there and really carrying on the impressions and the personas of those characters. But yeah, it wasn't until I think a couple months in, maybe even early 2009, where the idea came about of, I think it was after the one where I impersonated The Rock, and I think that was January 2009, where I sort of went, okay, I'm starting to feel bored of this. The crowd's into it, and the fun was there, but I think it was just a case of this is number one, I'm kind of running out of impressions here, and number two, I'm starting to gain my confidence, and I'm still trying to work out what this Flashman character would turn into. So it was a weird series of events that sort of led to a sink or swim moment where I think maybe even a month or two after that, we're maybe talking about April, May now, where Blaze and Fury just upped and left. And now the idea was that, okay, you've been managing these guys for close to going on a year now. You've been doing these impressions, but then coming out and managing these guys, they're not there anymore. So what do you want to do? Do you want to leave or do you want to stay? And I chose to stay. And I think that's where the whole idea of the biggest little man, the little engine that could, the size of the heart or the size of the fight and the dog kind of mentality, that underdog persona started to resonate with people, because I think it was not to pigeonhole myself, but it was something different because, one, I was the only guy of my size in that roster at that time. And two, like you touched on, there was kids there that, because of my size, didn't think anything more other than, oh, he's like me because of my size. So there was a sort of pigeonhole effect of, well, I've got a connection with these younger audiences because, hey, they think I am the younger audience. So it was this weird sort of dynamic for a while there. But yeah, you were there day one. But I assumed it was business, because outside of this realm, you were working at that time at what was known as Bruce 31, because you had just done two seasons at that time. Maybe the third was filmed. Yeah, the third was being filmed when I signed up, but there was definitely two that were done of IPW's television series called Slam Nation. But in 2009, you walked away from the commentary desk. So what happened there for you? Was it just a case of, hey, work's picking up, I got to go, or?
No, I got back in the ring. Was what happened.
Right.
So I got the, like, and this is the issue, and this is why I've kind of stayed retired ever since I finally did officially hang it up, is that when you get close to wrestling, and wrestling has been in my blood since I was a little kid. I was watching it since I was little, saw WrestleMania 1 on closed circuit TV, never missed a pay-per-view after that. And it was in and every once in a while, like when Jethro would come up, you know, him and I have such history, and I know he's a safe worker and always enjoyed working with him. We'd always do a little something because he was there and it had to be special. So, you know, him and I would beat each other up for a second. And it just slowly, surely, I started feeling more confident, and I started doing some trainings. And then I had an examination on my back because I had broken it. And they were like, "Yep, no, your broken vertebrae is better than your other one. So yeah, if you want to go back into sports, go for it." And I was like, "Yeah, all right." So took that as opportunity, and Pete was Hawk at the time was missing a few main event people down with injuries and things like that, and he wanted to do this big 6-man tag thing. So we did a storyline where I got involved, and then we did a big 6-man tag. And yeah, that I came out of retirement for that, and it was only going to be a short-term thing, but then it felt so good that we kept doing it.
For a while. That's right, because no, it's all starting to click back for me, because I thought at that point something had happened. You're like, man, I don't want to talk anymore, but something did happen, but it was in a positive way, which is, I don't want to talk anymore because I'm good to go.
Yeah. Well, I didn't get to go out on my terms, and that bothered me, and I see that a lot in if any wrestling fans out there watch the latest WWE 24 with Edge. You know, you get told, like, when I hurt myself, when I broke my back, I wrestled for a year with a cracked vertebrae in my back, thinking I had pulled a muscle, until I started losing feeling in my hands. Right. And then went and got an X-ray, and they're like, "Yeah, you got to stop everything immediately." Couldn't go to the gym, couldn't do nothing, couldn't even run, had to sit down all the time, lay down at most. And so that was it. There was no goodbye, no last match, no, here we go. And so when I got the all clear to kind of, you can have another go, it's like, shit, all right, well, I can do this again. And it might be different. I knew it was not going to be the devil may care, use my body as an implement of destruction that I used to be. And that was going to be a lot more ground and pound stuff. But at least I could come back and do something and go out on my terms. And that was weird, because we used to get paid to do commentary and the music, but you didn't get paid to wrestle.
Right.
And so I was actually losing money and upping the risk, which is not the smartest thing in the world to do. But it was what I wanted to do. And, you only have a finite time as a performer. And some guys fail to realize that and continue to do it way past they should. But, I knew I only had a short time. I'm not athletically gifted. Everything I had in wrestling, I worked my ass all for. So, I knew if I was going to have one more go, and I think my son had just been born at that stage, and I was just like, I gotta do this one last thing, and then I'll be done with it. And that's what I did. Yeah,
because we managed to get, I want to say, you did about if you're off the desk in 2009, you were there, you had about a year and a half run, where when we changed venues from where we were at the Bicentennial Center back down to Ashmore, you even had a run there as the IPW champion.
I did, and that was interesting, because when I first started with Pete, when it was still WCW Australia, I was the second international person he had working for him. There was a guy named Canadian Wolf that we just missed each other. He left and went back to Canada just as I'd come in. And I said, "Oh, did you ever make him champion?" And he went, "Nah, I thought about it, but we didn't." I said, "Well, you should put the belt on me, not because I want it, because they were calling it the world title. Yeah. And nobody outside of Australia had held it. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, put it on me, get some heat, we can build somebody, and then I'll drop it to him. And immediately, loved Pete to death, may he rest in peace. But he was just like, you've got an ego on you, and, you just want to be champion. I'm like, oh, man, I'm from the school of I don't care about wins and losses. I care about telling good stories and making stars where we can. Mm-hmm. So instead of putting the belt on me, he just had the champion beat my ass for a good year and a half. Yeah. And make me job out to his puppet claw thing that he had. But I did that run as champion, but it was because I said, I want to make your next guy. Who's your next guy? And he said, he's Poison. I want him to be champion. I said, great, give me the belt. I'll make him a star. Well, quote unquote, as moved as you can in Australian independent wrestling at the time. And that's the business that we did, and that was the angle that we went. And so I mean, it was cool to have. I like the image of me with the belt. I think I put it on my son, who was a premature child anyway, so he was a really, really tiny baby. So I put the belt on him, and the picture is ridiculous. But it was good. It was good to have for a little while.
Yeah, I remember those times, man, because not only were we share in the locker room, and we, like you said, we get to know each other at this point. This was close to, a year and a half of me being down there and now you coming back in the locker room. But this was also the time when we changed venues. I was out there 2 times. I had the second character coming up, so I think I shared the ring with you as the second character as Muse. But not only in the ring were we starting to work together, this was also around the time where the idea came about where, hey, do you want to join up with you on your television show, the Late Night Show? And that was I'm going to tell you, man, this is a shoot, because I haven't even told you this. That was a really nerve-wracking message to receive, because I knew that it was television. I knew that it was you, and I knew that, hey, I can't muck this up. But it was one of those sink or swim moments, just like when I started wrestling, where it was a case of, hey, you guys injured, do you want to wrestle? This was now a very similar opportunity where it was like, hey, man, do you want to come on board and pretty much do this weekly show here? I'll need to know pretty soon, because we're going to start filming in like the next couple of days. Take me back to that moment for you, because we'd always gotten along. Was it a case of you being like, man, I get along with this dude, and like you said earlier, he's got a good personality when it shines through, when he's not impersonating others? Was that all it drove for you to do it, or was it a case of, I want to just reach out and see what happens?
Trying to go back. I've been hitting the head a lot, so trying to go back and remember these things.
I was a guest for a couple of episodes.
You were a guest. Yeah, and I always liked to give opportunities to people, and when because I've always done different things at the same time. So like comedy was always there with the wrestling and acting and all that kind of stuff. So I started doing a late night show. Mostly because the guy I was producing a late night show, it wasn't called the Late Night Show, but it was called, Last Week Tonight? No, that's John Oliver's Last Night Tonight, or some bullshit. Anyway, and the host was just a giant douchebag and really hard to work with. And so eventually we ended up giving him the ass, and I had guest hosts, and I guest hosted a couple, and somebody just went, why don't you just do it if you like it so much? And I was like, oh, shit, yeah, okay. So I started doing the show. Originally we had no guest, no sidekick. It was just me and my friend Claude and then Whitey would come in. And then the second season, I'm like, no, let's start bringing people in. Let's start having guests. And the first sidekick officially was a girl named Max. Yeah. And Whitey would come in occasionally, because Whitey could never commit to anything. So he would come and go. So I had Max, and then she left, and then Ann Ferguson Howe came in, who was a comedian, quote unquote. And she was a giant pain in my ass. And I think you were a guest when she was on. And then when she moved on, I moved her on, she had gotten her own show. That's when I had an opportunity to go, let's reinvent this and redo this a bit differently. And that was when Alana Shooting Star came on as female guest host, and I thought, why do we have two? That would be fun. And you and I had always gotten along really well and joked and always had a good time. You know, you, Ash, Scorn, myself, Maddie, were always cracking jokes and being funny in the back of the locker room. And I thought, that's really good. So I thought, I like you. You have fun. So let's see if you're interested. And you were interested. And then we just started filming sketches and jokes and being a part of it, and it was cool.
And it was such a whirlwind time. We were doing that for many years together. I think I was there. Close to two or three?
Yeah, you came in season 3, so we did 5 years of the show total. It was 200 and something episodes. Yeah, so you came in about just at the beginning of season 3. I think you were guest season 2, and then probably came in season 3.
Yeah, because I remember coming up once or twice as a guest, and there was this guy. I can't remember the guest's name, but he was doing some sort of like height related thing, and I was like, man, you're not gonna call me out on.
That was what was his name? Jimmy something. And Rob Brown, I want to say, 2 douche canoe comedians, which there are of many. I think I was at the time as well, like, because you were a guest host, I think, at that time. You were sitting in a corner where we usually had the musicians. And, they started making jokes. And I didn't really think too much of it because we used to do the same thing to you.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until after that episode where you were like, man, that really fucking pissed me off. And I was just like, probably different when you're taking it from your friends as opposed to random strangers who think they're being funny. Because I think that was the bigger crime, was that they weren't even being funny. They were just being dicks.
Yeah, because there was one time I was a guest and sitting in the couch with those chairs next to you, and there was like a Harry Potter Dobby comment, and I was like, oh, cool, original, and then I shut that guy down pretty quick, and then he went back to being interviewed, and I was like, random, but sure, okay. And I think that was when we had like a studio audience. It might have been like either workplace or some sort of school came in and sat down and watched that one. But the second one where those 2 comedians were in, and I was sitting on a stool in like just off to the side there, and he just started by going, what is that? Who is that? What is that thing? And I was like, dude, just because you're bombing doesn't mean you have to try and rectify it by like calling me out. And it was just like this weird thing where I was like, it was just like, so strange. But I think the way that it all went down, it kind of worked for the better, because judging from what I can understand is that I think a lot of people in hindsight were like, no, that guy's pretty cool on the show. It wasn't a case of like them agreeing with that guy. It was a case of them being like, no, that dude's funny and gets along with Scott and gets along with the co-hosts and stuff. And it kind of oddly worked in our favor, where this guy tried to make an example of me and I ended up being made a permanent resident on the show. It was honestly such a humbling and learning experience, because not only were we doing that show, I was learning about the film and television industry to a certain extent, because that's what I was doing at the time. So to actually be a part of a television station and see the cameras and see how everything was run and go up and have meetings with you and see the run sheets and the teleprompter and everything like that, it was thrilling and exciting. But I think it was close to about a year in, we swapped guests to Amanda, absolutely amazing, talented lady. But the decision also came down the pipeline of, hey, by the way, we're now going to be doing this live. Yeah. So take me back to that moment, because I remember sitting there with you and being like, okay, you got to come up this day. And I went, okay, cool. Why? What's happening? Oh, we're doing it live. Was there anything behind the scenes for you at that point that made that decision to go live, or was that just a case of, hey, I want to try doing this live?
Well, at the time we were recording during the day and then airing it that night, and it was mostly selfish reasons, because there had been a number of times. Well, there were a few things going on. One, when I first started doing the show, I wasn't the boss at Bridge 31. I was an underling to an egomaniacal douche pickle who just kept trying to censor us and push us down. And so he And to his defense, I kind of see why, because I was a bit more rebellious at that stage. You know, I've always had that DX, damn the man, save the empire, like, you know, I'm going to break it down, Rage Against the Machine type attitude.
Yeah.
And so we kept pushing the boundaries, and that would upset him, and then he'd get a complaint, and I'd rail against the complaint, and that anyway. So eventually he got the ass because he was useless, and I ended up taking over as the boss, and so then I kind of had the freedom to kind of do what the audience wanted, what I wanted to do, and what was best for the show and the station. And I knew that we needed a live program so that people could get experience doing live TV, because that's the best kind of TV and kind of the only kind of TV that Australia is really good at producing. So I knew I needed a live show. Nobody wanted to do it. So I was like, all right, well, I'll do it, because at least if it happens on a comedy show, we can cover it. If something breaks, if something falls over, we can cover it. No problem. You know, we can make fun of it. And the other side of it, which was the more selfish side, is that writing the monologue, doing the monologue, and then some politician or somebody or celebrity or whatever would do something in between recording and airing that would completely fuck the monologue.
Right.
That, you know, like I would do something about, I think Julia Gillard was the prime minister at the time. I'd do something about a policy that she had enacted, and we would you know, do a good 3-4 minutes on this policy, and then between recording and airing, she'd backflip, or her party would backflip, and that policy wouldn't go in. So when it went to air, I kind of looked like an asshole.
Yeah, right.
So it was like, all right, fuck it, you know, let's do it live. We can train people on how to do live program. It'll make the show exciting, because then anything can happen. And I always love that about wrestling as well, and doing stand-up. So anything can happen. It's live. People get exposure. And if something changes between when I finish writing the monologue and us airing, I could change it so that we were as current as possible. And I mean, there were times I was rewording. I remember a couple of times giving hand signals to Reese, who was the teleprompter guy, to tell him to skip a joke because that had been removed because of something in the news. And you know, and I would tack something onto the bottom, or I would go off the top of my head or something like that. So yeah, it made it a bit more exciting, and it was very challenging, and it gave that kind of buzz. I find recording, even doing with this podcast, when you were before we started recording and you started going through the list of how you do it and all this kind of stuff, I'm like, just go for it, man. Just I much prefer going live and not knowing what's going to happen, and kind of going with it, as opposed to, you know, planning everything out. And that is in wrestling, as in life. I just prefer to go out there. I mean, there's a story that a friend of mine, a comedian, loves to tell about. You know, we're going in front of this crowd of a couple hundred people to do a stand-up show. And I said, man, I'm bored. And he goes, I got an idea. He goes, challenge. And I said, all right, what's your challenge? He goes, I don't want to hear anything you've ever written before. So I'm like 2 minutes without going on stage. And he's do a whole new show, do a whole new act. And I'm like, yeah, all right. So I went up there and just made it up. Was it great? It had moments, but I didn't bite it in the ass, and I fulfilled the bet, and people were entertained. So, you know, I like that kind of that challenge. So yeah, I do it all the time. I still do it to this day. I go on the ABC radio regularly, and they always send me run sheets and stuff. I don't think I've ever opened one.
Well, for the ABC listeners out there, there you go. Scott's never opened any of those run sheets.
Well, they keep asking me back, so it can't be too bad.
You'll open it this time. Speaking of a challenge, man, you bring up stand-up comedy. It just triggered a memory in my brain. It was you on live on air when we started doing this live. I think it was 2012 at this point, where live on air you issued me a challenge where you said we had a comedian on. And he was doing an open mic night, and he said as sort of like a passive comment, like, "Oh, Flash would be good at that." And then you sort of saw that red, you know, the red sheet of the raging charging bull, and went, "Oh, I'm going to play with this," and went, "Yeah, he would be." And it was this moment where, yeah, we're live on air. We've got you as the host. We've got the guest. And I think it was Amanda. Could have been Alana, but I'm pretty sure it was Amanda. Look, all three of you just looking at me. And it was this moment of like, do the line, Bart, where everyone was just staring at me with the red light, the camera's there. You could hear a pin drop in that studio. And I'm going, oh, okay, well, this is for TV. And I went, okay, I'll do it. And everyone was like, yay. And then the cameras stopped. We finished the episode. And I think I came up to you afterwards and I was like, I got to really do that now. And you're like, yep, it's live in Brisbane. There's a lot of people that saw that. And I'm like, damn it. But hey, it was a challenge. I had never written anything before. I think I went up there and I don't even know how long it was. Might have been like 5 minutes or something like that. Yep. Yeah. And I think I just sort of self-deprecated myself. Not defecate. Deprecated myself.
He did that before he got on stage.
Yeah. He's wearing a dress now. Yeah. And yeah, it was awesome, man. Like I really enjoyed it. I think the host had dropped a line earlier of like either some height related or medical thing. And I remember hearing that and going, oh, I'm going to grab that and run with it. And yeah, it was such a whirlwind experience, but yeah, we managed to do a couple of comedy shows there for a while. I mean, the whole concept of Late Night Show was comedy, but I'm talking about like outside the studio. We managed to do some runs there as a live event, which sort of took me back to like our wrestling days. And yeah, those were some crazy times, man. And hell, depending on where I am, I'll still to this day be recognized and either via my voice or probably 9 times out of 10 via my frame saying, hey, you know, I remember seeing you on TV. Did you do that comedy show with that American guy? And I was like, yeah, Scott Black. Yeah, that's it. I used to watch it all the time. I was a big fan. I'm thinking, big fan. Can't remember the host's name. It's in the name of the show. But hey, I appreciate all the comments and any sort of passing strangers that stop and want to have like a little bit of a handshake or a thank you. Not so much these days. Can't do the whole handshake thing, social distancing. But yeah, and I've got to say, man,
high five.
Yeah, elbow. But yeah, that's all thanks to you, buddy. So I really appreciate having that opportunity with you all those many moons ago to do that show. But it wasn't.
I never tried to. And I remember the look of panic on your face, like you had eaten some blowfish, and you was like, "Is this gonna kill me?" But the secret, like I started doing comedy stand up when I was just starting out in wrestling, and it was actually my trainer who told me to do it because he said it's essentially all you're doing is cutting a promo, and instead of cutting a promo on somebody, you're cutting a promo on the difference between men and women or airplane food or some shit, you know. So you're kind of just cutting promos and learning how to speak in front of an audience, which if you've ever cut a promo in wrestling, that's exactly what it's like. So I when they said it, and I think you're also one of those people who I love, but I also like to push because, you know, we would have a comedian on the show and him and I would be talking shop about comedy, and you'd be there and you'd be like, oh yeah, you know, I really like, I think one day I wouldn't mind that. I was just like, oh, well, here you go. Here's your parachute.
Yeah.
You know? So yeah. I'm always a fan of people who like, I want an opportunity. Here's an opportunity. Oh, I'll take that opportunity. And there's so many people who don't. And I still talk to some people, you know, that I knew back in uni days who will go, oh, you know, one day I'm gonna get in the ring. And it's like, dude, we're in our 40s now. That you missed it.
Yeah.
Like, you know, so they kept saying the whole time I was training, oh, I'm just going to get in shape and I'll do it. Oh, I'm just going to do this and this. It's like, just fucking do it. Like, life's too short to wonder what if to do it. So yeah, when the opportunity that I can help give someone a push is always rewarding for me. And it's also hilarious as hell to watch people go, oh, fuck, what? Huh? What? So it's a double-edged sword. I like doing it because I know you. I wouldn't do it if I didn't think you could do it. If I thought it was going to be an absolute train wreck and that you were going to die in the ass on stage, I wouldn't do that to you because that's not a great feeling. But I had seen you do promos. I had seen you be funny on the show, and stand-up isn't that hard. And funny is something you are. It's not something you can learn. So yeah. Give someone the opportunity, and they'll knock it out of the park.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. And yeah, I don't know if I completely knocked it out of the park, but I would have at least got to third base and looking at hitting a home run. But I totally had fun. I don't think I wrote anything down. Like I didn't take a book with me on stage or anything like that, but I think I wrote it down on my phone. And yeah, I was sweating. And for some reason, I had an obsession with big jackets, and I wore a gigantic jumper to this bar. And it's just, I don't know why I was obsessed with huge, large jackets. It was, I don't know. I think it was probably a small, but it was baggy as hell.
It was a trend. It was a trend. It was your version of the Zubers or whatever the hell those pants were people wore in the 90s. No, but you do have a bit of selective memory on this one because I always equivalent that time to that was your moment where you were like the little dog in the old Looney Tunes cartoons walking around the bigger dog going, what about this? What are we doing today? Because for the weeks leading up to that show where you did your first stand-up show, you're like, I'm thinking about this joke. What about this joke? I'm thinking about this joke. I'm thinking about this joke. And then I would be like, yeah, all right. Well, I would do this, put it around that way, and there you go. And you go, oh, that's perfect. And then the next week you'd come back, and it would be completely different. You had binned everything that you had talked about me previously. Like, what about this one? No, it's like, what happened to this one? I didn't like them anymore. It's like, oh man, you're overthinking it. But it was great to see because then I found that entertaining. That tickled my funny bone, so I was happy with that. But yeah, I mean, then that's what you do. I could see the nerves come out of the service, and I hadn't probably seen you nervous like that before. Like you would usually when you get nervous, you get quiet and you kind of like self-reflecting and kind of internally. But this was different. This was like an excited nervous, which I don't know, it tickled me.
Yeah, I do remember. Now you've triggered my memory. I do remember coming to you pretty much weekly when we're doing those shows, and I was like, "Hey, so this thing's in like 2 weeks," and you're like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Oh, so I've written that," and I remember calling you up and messaging you pretty much all the time, and I was like, "Hey, what about this?" And you're like, "Yeah, I mean, yeah, I get it." And I'm like, "But do you think it's funny?" "Oh, well, I mean, you've told me it before, so." And I'm like, Yeah. I was sort of like, on edge about it. But hey, you brought up before about you touched briefly then on the double-edged sword. You were running the station at this point, and you're also doing the show, so you're sort of hitting it from both ends, both behind the scenes and in front of the camera. Now, I know we've talked about it in the years gone by, but at that time, man, I was only made aware because of a banner that you'd made, and I'm sure you know where I'm going with this, but for those listening, the show, to all the people either working on it, excluding yourself, it kind of came as a big sort of wrenching of the brakes. Oh, last call, guys, and it was a very abrupt moment when all of us collectively found out on social media that the Late Night Show, it was, you were wrapping it up. You're going to, this is the last air date. This is the last episode. We'll try and get everyone back that we can, but hey, this is the final call. I don't think I ever really quizzed you on it. And I think, with this concept of this podcast, having a big conversation about it, for you, because I know at that time you were feeling a bit burnt out, both professionally and performance-wise, but in your mind, why then? Why did it sort of have to say, hey, okay, I'm tapping out? Did you feel like the show had run its course, or were you just feeling so creatively burnt out that you went, hey, if I push this, I'm going to ruin something here, and it's going to not be what I want to do?
There were a few things. I mean, one, it wasn't like, we had 2 shows left and we were done. I think I had given it like 15 weeks of shows before the final one. 13, 15, I can't remember. Because I made it, I think it was serendipitous. There were a few things going on. One, Turnbull had announced that, who was the communications minister at the time, that community television was going the way of the dodo and that he was going to pull it for reasons no one still to this day understands. Professionally, I was dealing with a board at the station who couldn't manage their way out of a paper bag. And it was a stressful situation. And then the show, which was my creative outlet. I mean, you got to remember, I was at the station running it for 9 hours a day. And on the days of filming, and everything we did for Late Night Show was in my own time. So I would be writing at night, and then I had a new baby. At that time, Xander had just been born. And then we would go and do the show. So I would be at the station all day, go home, see my wife and kids for a while, go back to the station and do the show. So there was that. Then there was things like I would get these associate producers because I kept putting my hand up for help. Like, I need help doing this. I need help getting guests. I need help with writing, you know, and all this stuff. And people would come in for a cup of coffee and fuck off. And that was starting to wear on me. And then there was a lot of people on the show who would come in and just kind of go and look to me to be like the leader and tell them what to do all the time. And it got to the point when we were doing, you know, when you're after 150 something episodes, you should be able to be calm to know that everyone knows their role. But we were having issues week, you know, 190 that we were having week 110. And that's just the nature of community broadcasting. So those kind of things were in my mind. And then I think I was sitting down and I was looking at the calendar, and I had because I'm litigious when it comes to organizing. And so I had my calendar up for the year, and I saw that episode 200 was literally a couple of days after my birthday. Right. And I was just like, shit, if that's not serendipitous for me to go, all right, that's the exit day. And again, and maybe there was a part of me that was like, I think we've run our course. But I definitely wasn't sick of doing it. I think I was sick of a lot of the stuff that went into it. And it was the dealing with the volunteer crew. It was dealing with the board. It was dealing with any complaints, which we got on the regular. It was also feeling like I have an hour of content every week I've got to fill, and was getting not a lot of help with it and having to fill it all myself. And I think it was just like, well, if everyone's looking to me like it's your thing, it's your 100% your thing, then all of a sudden it's like, well, all right, well, I feel like I've had enough. And it's like, whoa, why weren't we consulted? It's like, well, I'm sorry. If you're not going to help make dinner, you can't bitch when you don't like the taste, you know? Right. Yeah. So, and it was, I think I want to, I think I had put the banner up, and then I had messaged you and messaged Becky, and then started answering all the other ones. I mean, I think Chris as well, the floor producer, world's most useless floor producer, who I'm still friends with, still love dearly, but he was useless. But that was his chick. That was the reason why I had him there, is because he was useless, and it cracked me up. But yeah, I think it was just one of those things where it was like the perfect time to just walk away. And I've always been a big fan of leaving before you wear out your welcome. And I think we had gotten as big as we could get. We had done some awesome TV. We had done some pretty amazing things, but I could see the writing on the wall that the station didn't have long, and I was right. My time at the station as well was coming to an end, because I was having constant wars with the board about the direction of the station. Right. A lot of people love to say that I killed Bruce 31, and I wish I could have that accoutrement, that title to my resume. But the fact is, the matter is that when I left Bruce 31, there was all these contracts, there was like money in the bank, everything was ready to go, and then they just took the vision that I had for the place and threw it away. And that's what pretty much killed it, was them not following through on what they should have been doing. And the proof of the matter is that I don't think any of those people that were involved in that stage are still in the industry, and I am. So right, I'll take that as a feather in the cap. Yeah. But yeah, it wasn't just one particular thing. It was many things.
Okay, because I always wanted to know that, but that wasn't the last time that you and I got to do some TV together, because it was shortly thereafter, I think mid to late 2013, the idea came up of, hey, why don't we run not only a training facility, but let's turn this into a television show that, I guess, just sort of had a training facility on the side in order to produce the talent needed for a television show. And that's where the concept and the production began on a show called QPW, Queensland Pro Wrestling. Man, those were some really developmental times professionally for me, because it was, like you just touched on before, it was a strange transitional time, or looming transitional time for you at 31 Digital. We had guys that you'd known for years on end that I was still getting to know at that point come in, help out with it. But man, I think we managed to clock a season out of that. And then, yeah, it was shortly thereafter where an agreement had come down the pipeline of a season 2. But just before I had that meeting, you had stepped away. You had left, and the transition period had happened, and a season 2 was spoken about and agreed upon. And then subsequently, hey, this has got to go because 31's closing. But we did get to work on TV together. I think we managed to go out there and do some comedy shtick, try some stuff out that we maybe hadn't been able to do, or sort of pay tribute to things that we had done down the line before. But man, yeah, I'm pretty chuffed to say after all these years that, you know, when pen comes to paper, we were able to work on, hell, I mean, you could even count 3 television shows if you count the origins of when I was there at IPW and you guys were doing the season 3. But I always, in terms of actually being aware of the cameras and actually knowing who you were and being able to work together, man, those 2 shows almost seemingly back to back was a lot of fun. Did you enjoy the process? Obviously, feeling the professional pinch behind the scenes of, hey, I'm not really feeling as comfortable as what you once were at 31 Digital, for lack of a better term. But did you enjoy that creative process that we had at QPW? Because that was originally an idea that you had drumming around for a while.
It was. So when I was doing the wrestling for Pete and IPW, right, it started off as I had the idea, and Pete was like, yeah, sure, you can film our shows and make them into TV shows. But it was very unaccommodating. It was very unaccommodating for us, because it was essentially, you know, you can't have the live commentary. I had to do it in post. Like, you couldn't, you know, I had to film it all. I had to edit it all. And all the shows were, you know, I had to essentially make these storylines up for the TV show, because it was just whatever. They were very unaccommodating, but very appreciative of all the attention the show got. So when the opportunity came to start our own, it was interesting in the way that, like, it was essentially the Performance Center before the Performance Center was a thing. Like, right, the idea was the same. We'll create a gym that people can train, learn. We can create these stars from the bottom up, these characters from the bottom up, so that we have a full, you know, roster of our own people who are going to be skilled because they're working only with each other, and who go out and help pepper the landscape of professional wrestling in Queensland. So it was fun, and it was you and me and Maddie, and I really enjoyed that process. But at the same time, the pressures from outside of that took away from it, because I had to get a grant to be able to get the ring and the belts and all that kind of stuff. And then it was like, how are you going to make money out of this? And it's like, I've got a grant for it. Like, we don't have to. No, everything's got to make a budget, blah, blah. So there was this constant pressure of, like, squeezing stones to try to get anything out of it. And so at that stage, I could see the writing on the wall. And it was bad. I actually probably stayed for 6 to 8 months longer at Bruce 31 because of QPW.
Wow.
And you guys, because I was scared that exactly what happened would happen.
Yeah.
And that as soon as I was gone, anything that was built in my image, quote unquote, would be killed off. And that's exactly what happened. So yeah, they would toy with, you know, with you and the guys and gals at QPW and be like, hey, you know, no, we're going to do this. We believe in this. And then it would be like, you know, turn around and not so much. But at the same time, the sky was falling out of community television all over the place. It wasn't just Brisbane. If you look at the landscape now, there was 5.5 stations in community broadcasting at the height. There are now 2. So,
Right.
you know, Sydney fell, Lismore fell, Perth fell, we fell. You know, all that's left is Adelaide and Melbourne, and they're on the bubble because they're going to be pulled off TV at the end of this year. Well, actually in June, unless there's a reprieve, and I doubt there's going to be. So, you know, it was something that had borrowed time anyway. So I can't hate on them too much as I want to.
Yeah, it was a strange time down there, but hey, we made it work. We dressed it up. We managed to put it on air.
And you still have the belt, you son of a bitch.
Yeah. They wanted me to come pick up the props. They wanted to do a season 2. So yeah, I picked it up, and yeah,
I designed it.
Yeah,
I built it.
Yeah, it's I'm
going to come at you with a steel chair and take it back one day.
Man, you're more than welcome. It's been polished and it's sitting in a glass cabinet in my house. I'm very proud of the work we've done. But hey, if you want it back, man, you're more than welcome to have it.
It's all right. It's too many painful memories.
Well, speaking of memories, man, I remember one time we got some angry fan mail on the Late Night Show, and the fan said, "Oh, get rid of that host. That accent is so fake. He's not even American." Man, you want to recline the hands of time here, because you didn't just start in good old Queensland, Australia, and started wrestling down there at IPW, and I just happen to be a TV guy at the moment. Take me back, man. How did you get here, and how did this television journey begin?
Well, my mom and dad loved each other very much, and one night they had too much Jack Daniels. That guy also said that I wasn't actually American, that I had went to school with him in Gympie.
That's right, Gympie.
Yeah. And if anyone knows Gympie, you know, going to school in Gympie is a bit rhetorical. That's not something that happens. So every state's got one. But you know, so I grew up. I was born in Vermont, which is in the northeast of the U.S., to a very rural family. We had a farm, cows, and the whole 9 yards. But then my parents split when I was 3. I was I didn't know you could have kids kid. So my parents were both older, and my siblings are all much older than I am. Right. So once I was born, the parents split after 25 years of marriage. They were like, well, this is the straw that broke the camel's back.
Right.
And so we ended up moving to Connecticut, just outside of Hartford, Connecticut. And of course, if anyone knows wrestling, they know that WWE is based in Stamford, Connecticut, which is a literal sneeze away from where I was growing up. Mm-hmm. So being a kid of the 80s and being a wrestling fan from the day dot, being that close to where WWE was, meant that I was given a lot of things of being able to go to wrestling shows quite often for quite cheap, and having memories of being snubbed by Hulk Hogan.
Really?
Yeah, I got backstage to a show when I was a kid at the Hartford Civic Center and went up to Hulk Hogan for an autograph, and he looked at me and went, "Fine, I ain't got fucking time for this," and just walked off. And I was like the biggest Hulkamaniac at that stage. And that happened. I was like, immediately from that point on, I was like, fuck Hulk Hogan. And to this day, I still hold that sentiment.
Oh, wow.
And so when him and Shawn Michaels had their program and Shawn Michaels made him look like a bitch, I was just like, yeah, there you go. That was for little Scotty. I can hold a grudge sometimes. But no, so I grew up funny enough, I'm born in a rural environment, grew up in an urban environment. So right away, the differences between me and my other kin is night and day. They're all country bumpkins as opposed to I'm the city slicker. So, but always the one thing that me and even my brother and I could get together was wrestling. Right. And watching Savage and Dino Bravo and Ricky Martel and Jake the Snake and all those guys in the early 80s we just changed our brains. And I remember being a kid and doing the Ric Flair woo and doing the Macho Man elbow off the back of the couch on my brother and being pile driven by my brother, which could explain for a lot of things. But wrestling was always kind of there. But at the same time, my grandfather, who was like my real dad, he wasn't my real dad, he was my grandfather, but he was showing me things like the Marx Brothers and Bob Hope and George Burns and George Carlin and the MASH and, you know, all that kind of classic comedy. So comedy and wrestling were probably the two most steadfast things in my life and the most stable things in my life. So yeah, that always carried through and I always stayed true. The only other thing I think that might trump them is my love for Superman, which is, I think my psychologist nutted it down to my love of Superman is my want of the ultimate father figure, if you want to get psychological about it.
Oh, okay.
Someone who will never let you down, who will always do what's right, who will always, you know, fight for what's right and be there. But yeah, so I'm staring at my Superman coffee mug at the moment. So no matter, this revelation still hasn't changed anything.
But that was your history back there. How did you travel pretty much across the globe to get here to then be involved in television?
Well, so I was still in high school when I started wrestling. So it would have been 1993. I was watching, what was it on Saturday? It was Saturday morning. I think it was Superstars, Saturday Morning Superstars. Right. With Todd Pettengill. And I was watching it with my uncle, who was a bit like me as well, who was just kind of like, fuck it, I'm just going to go do it kind of guy. And he went, oh, this looks fun. He had never watched wrestling. And I said, yeah, this is the best thing ever. And he's like, oh, is there local feds? Yeah, I said, yeah, there's some local promotions. He's like, I'm going to go do it. I'm like, you can't just go do it, idiot. Yeah. And so he goes and gets trained and starts wrestling. And I'm like, oh, fuck, you can't just go do it. So I went with him and got trained as well and started doing shows. So I was wrestling in the U.S., mostly for a company called Green Mountain Wrestling out of Vermont, but would go out to Canada, down the coast and things like that and travel about. And at the time was also doing open mic stand-up because that was always a passion as well. And then started doing radio when I was in, it would have been 15. So I was still in high school. I started a part-time shift at a radio station. And so the entertainment blood, the performing, you know, it was all there, being in broadcasting. And then, so flash forward to I finished high school, still wrestling, working radio full-time, loving it. And then had a car accident that kind of shelved me for a little while and kind of got into this depression cycle and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of retreated to the internet, which was still new at that stage. And just randomly met a person on the internet, which was a big taboo thing back in the day. Now it's like everyone meets on the internet. But back then it was like, you're going to get murdered by a serial killer if you talk to somebody online and meet them in real life. So I met my wife, who was from Australia, and she came to the States and stayed there for a while, and then said, do you want to go back to Australia? And I said, does it snow there? And she said, nope, that went fucking beauty. So I was happy to get out of there. I always thought, I always knew that the States weren't for me, which is when my two favorite fictional characters are Superman and Captain America. But also my third favorite character of all time is Doctor Who, which kind of shows you where I was heading. I was going to go to the UK, and then or Canada, but I knew US wasn't for me. So Australia, obviously, much better weather than UK or Canada, so that worked. So I went there, came here, fell in love with it right away. Luckily, it worked out with the now wife. We've been together for 20 years now.
Wow, 20 years,
two kids. And the problem and how I got into TV was that I got here and they said wrong accent for radio. And they were they were like, no, thank you. And I had produced radio for some of the, Don and Mike's show, and this is only for really a gangster. It was one of the biggest radio shows in the country was Don and Mike Show, and I used to be one of their producers. I didn't write anything for them, but I was just a desk producer. But I had my own radio show. I had a morning show that we were number one in our demographic. I had in our area region. I had an afternoon show on a classical rock station. I was on a country. Like, I had all this experience. So to come here and be like, no, thank you, because your accent's like, fuck you. So I said, all right, well, in that case, I will get into community broadcasting, and fell volunteering for Bris 31 at the time. So I did literally every job at that place. I was a volunteer there for a year, got employed as a grunt, and just ended up running the place towards the end. So that was the journey, was pretty much because at that time commercial radio in Australia was like, sorry, you have the wrong accent for us. But now here I am, also back in radio again. So all full circle.
Yeah. So you join up. So you're saying you're doing radio again now. What is the station, and what is your role there now? Is it similar to 31?
Not really. So I am the general manager, station manager for Reading Radio 4RPH. Reading Radio 4RPH is a reading station. It's in the name. So our demographic is that we work for people who have a print disability. So people who either can't read words because of learning difficulties, vision impairment, any kind of thing, physical disability. And so our morning show is reading the newspaper. So we read the newspapers, magazines, books, curate content off the internet, all different types of stuff. So no, it's different. It's more of a service than a radio station, but I really do enjoy it. And at the moment, due to the COVID-19 stuff, I'm the only person in the studio, so everyone Zooms in over Zoom or Skype into the station, and I put them to air. But I do 6 hours of radio Monday to Friday at the moment, while still running the place.
That must feel a bit surreal, being into that empty environment right now.
It can be weird, because I've spent, like, when I first started here, the volunteership was pretty low. And it was a pretty barren place and not a very friendly place. And over the last 3 years, I've really worked really, really hard to make it a place that people want to be, and fun, vibrant environment, and then just have to shut it out immediately. Like, we were one of the early shutdowns. Like, we voluntarily shut down. A lot of my volunteers are in that high-risk demographic.
Oh, wow.
So with my volunteer coordinator, we sat down, and I had already limited it, cut production, made people start working from home. And then we just said, no, we've got to pull it. And I mean, we would have been forced to anyway. But yeah, we pulled it out. So I've been doing it for 3 weeks now. It's coming in.
Wow. So how did you come about getting your start now in Australian wrestling? Was it just a case of hit it up in the local paper and say, hey, I've been doing this in the States, might as well pick it up here?
Pretty much, I had pretty much given wrestling a flick, thinking that once I came here, it was pretty much Dunskies. And didn't know that there was an Australian scene. And I think I was still watching WWE, and somebody found a flyer for one of the WCW shows at Southport Basketball Stadium, and said, "Oh, we should go." So my father-in-law Robert and I went down to watch, and I was just like, "Oh, these guys are pretty fun." And it was, Pepe the Clown versus the Canadian Wolf, and it was the Sweet Assassin versus, I forget who he fought. I think it might have been Commando. No, he fought Jackaroo. And then it was a Weird One versus Hawk in a rat trap table match.
Jeez.
I was like, oh, okay, these guys are pretty interesting. And then went up and talked to Hawk after the show. Yeah. And I said, oh, yeah, I'm a wrestler from the States. And he went, oh, you should come to one of our trainings. And I said, oh, yeah, that'll be pretty fun. And he goes, yeah, no worries, $50. So it's like, right. All right. So I went there and trained. I went for a training one night and showed him what I could do. He was just like, yeah, get in there. Let's see what happens. And so in America, especially back in the early days, you would you're trained to wrestle the left side. But in America, you would get people who would do it back to front and train on the right side. So American style was trained on the right side. It's only now, I think probably in the last 20 years, that it's pretty much a universal standard. Everyone goes the left side.
Yeah.
So I was on the right side and immediately just got hung shit on. And especially by one particular guy named Hayden, who fancied himself a shooter. And so I remember going, all right, well, I've got some shit to prove here. But immediately was put in, like, so he thought I was not much and I'm Yang, don't know anything. And then, so I don't know why, but then Pete immediately put me in the main event scene for the company.
Oh, straight up.
My debut match for WCW Australia was in the main event against Jethro for the title. And where I put the infamous ding in the brand new $300 belt because I potatoed Jethro with the belt. And because he goes, how hard do you, I said, he goes, hit me with the belt. I said, how hard do you want it? He goes, give me everything you got. And I went, are you sure? And he just went, yeah, I can take it. And then he doesn't remember anything after me hitting him with the belt, which is also, he got me back because he also hit me with the last German suplex that I ever took because he dropped me right on the back of my head. And I said from that day forward, I was never going to take a German suplex again. So whenever anyone ever tried, I used to kick him in the dick. So yeah, that never took a German suplex again after that.
Is that?
Yeah. So that's pretty much how I got in there, and then I was there for donkey's years.
Yeah, and then you mentioned earlier in the podcast you had the injury. Was that in wrestling or was that outside the ring?
No, that was in there. It's on the on the online for everyone to see. So we got to the stage where Hawk was really going to have a big gamble on us and really trying to put us into the mainstream. Again, it always seemed to be a part of these things that were way ahead of their time. Like if he had done what he did then now, it would have been a success. It would have gone viral. It would have had all this stuff. But we were just at that time where the internet was there, but not really a part of it. There was really not YouTube.
Yeah.
People were still doing fucking VHS tape trades, stuff like that. So he put this money into doing this big show at this big venue in Southport, which was huge. It was a huge stadium. Fit a couple thousand people, I think. And then bought these talents from ECW to come out, Steve Corino, C.W. Anderson, brought up these guys from Sydney and Melbourne. And he said to me, he goes, what do you want to do? I want to make this special. And it was one of his moments where he loved me. And so I said that me and Jason Helton, so Jason Helton is a former WCW, WWE, ECW enhancement talent. He'll hate me saying that, but he never had a big run in any of the companies. He was used to pretty much put people over. Famously, he my favorite thing ever, and I send him this to him on his birthday still every year, is him getting tombstoned. He was the first guy who got beat up by the Undertaker back in the early days. The Undertaker, who he didn't even take his jacket off. Like he Undertaker was in a program with a guy named Nails who had this prisoner gimmick. He gets in the ring for a match with Helton. Taker hasn't even taken his jacket off, and Nails tries to attack him. Helton tries to sneak attack him. He gets choke slammed. No, he gets big booted. He gets choke slammed, and he gets tombstoned and pinned. And Taker doesn't even take his jacket off. And this was, I don't know, mid '90s. So I still send him the picture of him getting tombstoned to him every year on his birthday. But him and I always wanted to work together, and never had a chance. So he came up, and we did an ECW street fight. And
wow. How'd that go?
It was pretty good, except for breaking my back. So right. I mean, we had everything. We had all the accoutrement, tables and chairs. But I decided I was going to make the tables because it's a street fight, and I always hated it in a street fight where they would pull out like a folding table. You're not going to find a folding table in a street fight. You're going to find planks of wood. You're going to find, junk. So I had these really junk sawhorses and pulled out some wood and made a table to go through. And the spot was supposed to be, we would fight on the apron, tease a table spot, and then he was going to go for a back elbow. I was going to catch him, and I was going to leg sweep him off the apron, and we were both going to crash through the table. Now, depending on who you talk to, I have the facts. He has his version, and he held on to the top rope. So I don't know if he pussed out or what, or had second thoughts or whatever, but he held. So I whip us back. He held on to the top rope. So him holding made me come off at an angle, and I went through the table first and landed awkwardly on the top of my back and cracked a vertebrae. Oh. And then he came down on top of me. If you watch the match, which is still on YouTube, like you see me every time I go to get up, I roll over, I can't get up. We continue the match because this is wrestling. We're not that smart. Every time I do something like pick him up, body slam him, my legs just give out and I just go down. There's a spot as well where he has me in a crippler crossface because he's Canadian and that's by law he has to do it. I pick him up out of the crippler crossface into an F5 and just totally just chunk him on my own head. And so we finished the match. I think I did an elbow off the top rope, and then I gave him the gravedigger onto a steel chair and pinned him 1, 2, 3. But I don't really remember that much of it. I only remember it from the video. And then for the next year, I thought I had just a really severe pulled muscle because it kind of hurt, but it wasn't stopping me from doing anything. So I still wrestled for another year and a bit with this injury until I started, losing feeling in my hands. And that's when I went and got tested, and they're like, stop everything. And so it didn't, obviously it didn't sever because I wouldn't be walking, but the crack was just kind of bouncing around. And then occasionally what was coming in the numbness is supposedly, I guess my nerves were getting like hitting with friction or something, and it was just it would cause a burning sensation in like my armpits, and then my fingers would lose feeling and stuff. So there was a year and a bit that I couldn't do anything, which sucked because I've always had a weight problem, and this was at my fittest I had ever been in my life. I was ripped, I was looking good, and immediately it was taken away from me and I couldn't go to the gym anymore. I couldn't even run. I wasn't even supposed to jog at like a brisk pace until this healed. And then, of course, the depression cycle comes from being sidelined and you start eating. And but that was it. That was the fun thing.
Man, I had no idea of all the exterior situations that came about after that injury because, there's the old saying with wrestling is it ain't ballet. And, we do put our lives in each other's hands, but man, that was such a, I've seen that footage, and each time you look at that bump and you go, oh, that looked a bit rough, but hearing it firsthand from you, the guy that had that match and subsequently had that injury, man, sometimes it is sometimes the littlest sort of slight tweaks or just the way that you land that sometimes have the biggest ripple effect in injuries. It's a real risk, but hey, it all turned out for the best one way or another. You got to have a second run. You got to have that commentary desk. You got to involved in television and still involved in media to some extent today. So very lucky.
No regrets. I'd do it all again. And funny enough, during that injury, I actually had some of my best matches while I was still hurt. So it was a weird thing, and then getting to come back and do it my way. I still I get asked occasionally to come back and do a show now or do a match, and I keep saying no because I like the fact that I said I'm done, and I like being done.
Right.
And so even I think the closest I have ever given in was that recently IPW asked me to come do a reunion show, and it was just after Hawk had passed away. And I thought, and then of course he dropped me with the whole do it for Pete kind of mentality. And I'm like, all right. So I said, I'll come and do like a Rumble spot, but I'm not having a match. So I even I had a shirt made up that said, not dead, just retired, and did a spot and then immediately got out. And that was the close. And that was it. I will not 100%. I will never wrestle another match. And and it's just because it's too risky. And you know, I'm 40. You know, I know my body better than anyone. It hurts all the time now from everything I've done for it. So why would I risk that? And I used to love the fact that it was me and Shawn Michaels who had retired and never come back. And then he went back and did that match in Saudi Arabia. And I'm like, But, and I understand if I had that kind of payday, if someone was offering me $6 million to do one match, 100% I would do it. But that ain't happening here. And so, it'll just be me now.
Hey, I'll tell you what is happening. We're about to wrap up this podcast. But before we do, I'm going to hit you with what I call a deep dive. Now, this is a segment where I ask my interviewees questions that only they can give their unique spin and their own unique answer to. So, Scott, are you ready for the deep dive?
Yeah, hit me deep. That sounded weird.
I'm just going to ask you these questions. I don't know what you want me to do to you, but I'm going to ask you these questions.
I'm lonely. I haven't had any contact with this isolation.
Hey, what was a turning point in your life? How did it affect you, and how did you overcome it?
Turning point in my life. I would probably say the birth of my children, obviously. Made me realize that a lot of the shit that I was thinking meant everything, didn't mean anything, and that their health and happiness meant the world to me, means everything else. So I was able to let go of a lot of anger and issues and my rebellious streaks and just realize that life is a bit silly and have fun with it.
Man, that's definitely a very crucial turning point. I think not only in your life, but anyone's life. I think it's a complete accurate assumption there of, your whole mentality shift. Did your whole mentality shift? That was a case of, okay, all that stuff that I'm worried about, all those bygone moments. Yep, we'll put that behind because now, hey, you know, I'm a dad.
For sure. I mean, it just meant that what kind of man did I want them to see? Did I want to see someone who's obsessed with, you know, views and fans and social media and, you know, stressing out over everything? Or did I want someone that was just there for them, that would get on the ground and play Lego and, you know, that kind of stuff? And I thought, you know, so everything I was kind of raging against in my own mind and trying to build an audience and build a brand and all that kind of shit, I was like, oh, none of that matters. And the only thing that matters to me is this tiny human, two tiny humans that, you know, need me more than, you know, somebody needs me to make them laugh or perform at a show. So, I pretty much stopped doing stand-up once they were born. I kind of stopped doing my own shows. I still do things every once in a while, but if it fits within the schedule for my family. I even tell them here at work all the time, like when they're, you know, if my kids got something on, they're number one. This place is number two. So my family is number one. Everything else comes afterwards. So they always will get my attention first.
Right. Yeah, that's some solid advice to hand out to people listening. You've always been giving me good advice. To me, we're both inside and outside the ring, with our shows, with stand-up comedy, and being in the ring, working together. But hey, that's the advice that you've given. But what is the best advice that you have ever received?
Let's see. I guess there's a few. I guess when it comes to different, I think the one I probably give back the most is that if you feel like a dickhead, you're doing it right, and that kind of goes for a lot of things. So in wrestling, in performance, in broadcasting, and in life, people are afraid to put themselves out there. People are afraid to show vulnerability or be a dag or be, you know, uncool or be themselves. So everyone's putting up this front. Everyone's pretending to be things they're not. Everyone's pretending to be more important than they are because no one wants to feel like a dickhead. And I always say that when you feel like you're being a dickhead, that's when you're being your truest self. And it comes to that point of it's not feeling like a dickhead and being self-aware of it, but being like a dickhead and being okay with it. So in wrestling, you know, earlier in my career, I was like the evil dark lord kind of guy because I love that kind of shit. I love horror movies. I love that stuff. But it wasn't until I was the guy who is roasting people, talking shit, getting hit, that I hit my stride because that's who I am. And that's when I felt like a dickhead. And I was happy with that because I knew that I was hitting the right nerve and being that, exposing who I really was to an audience. So I guess, that would be my favorite bit of advice that I got years and years ago, which is, if you're feeling like a dick, you're doing it right, which is my friend Phil, who I'm still friends with in radio, because I said I didn't feel like doing a sketch on a radio show because it made me feel I was being silly. I felt silly. And he goes, if you feel like a dickhead, you're doing it right. I'm like, so I've kept that.
Okay. So, yeah, I get what you mean by that. But
it's exposing your most vulnerable self. It's simplified version of saying be true to yourself. And if you have something to offer and a personality, and if you have something to offer, people will see that. You don't have to pretend.
You mentioned earlier about 2 or 3 pop icons or shows that influenced you growing up and possibly when you were moving over here, likes of Superman, Doctor Who. But who are your personal heroes, and why do you hold them in such high regard?
Easiest one for me, my number one iconic role model, not his personal life so much as just, I guess, his professional, would be Johnny Carson. Johnny Carson was a huge late night host in the States. Like, he was the man. He could change someone's career. He's the man responsible for David Letterman and Ray Romano and Jerry Seinfeld and Joan Rivers. Like, he discovered and made these people stars. Always funny. And even now you can go back and watch his monologues and his shows, and he's still funny, still relevant even today. It was just, wanted to always be the best. Never got full of himself. Never was like, I am the greatest of all times, and I will, was always humble, always ready to do it. Johnny Carson for comedy and life. I think he was my torchbearer. In wrestling, Macho Man and Shawn Michaels were, they're 2 different eras, but Macho Man was my first, like, ooh, who is that? And he was just so outlandish and over the top, and I loved it. And then when I saw Shawn Michaels for the first time, he was USWA. I saw him on a tape. And then when he got to WWE as the Rockers, I was like, that guy has everything I want to be in a man. And then in the 90s, he was my guy. Even when he was heel, when he was face, when everyone hated him, when everyone wanted him to go away, he was my guy. And when he came back, I don't think anyone would have been more emotional when he came back for that 2005 SummerSlam match against Triple H. I think that was probably the happiest I've ever been with wrestling.
Yeah, no, that was a surreal moment to see Shawn after all those years, losing his smile, do the commissioner angle, but sort of take a leave of absence for a while there. But I think, definitely that 2002 SummerSlam where it was like could he, couldn't he?
Was it 2002?
Yeah, man, 2002. Because he went into Elimination Chamber in 2003 and won the title in that when he had the brown tights.
Yeah, blue brown tights.
But hey, you were a host yourself. One of the main influences in your life with Johnny Carson, the host of the Tonight Show. But this brings up another segment. Speaking of hosts, this brings us to the next segment, the Lipton 6. This is in tribute of James Lipton, who sadly we lost earlier this year in March 2020. He was an American writer, lyricist, actor, and the dean of the Actors Studio Drama School at Pace University in New York City, where he hosted and ran his TV show Inside the Actors Studio from 1994 to 2018. So, in honor and tribute of him, I'm going to ask you his famous 6 questions that he would ask all his guests before wrapping up his interview. So first, Cab, off the rank, what is your favorite word?
My favorite word would have to probably be, I'd have to probably say innovation. I use it a lot, and it's something that I like to do, no matter what I'm doing, is always try to see how I can make things better. So I say innovation.
Okay. What turns you on? Now, you could answer in the way that you're thinking, but it also means like, hey, what gets you excited? What says, hey, makes you happy, gets you fired up? What do you appreciate? So,
well, same in the bedroom as it is in real life. Creativity. The creativity gets me going no matter where it comes. I love to see people creating. I love to see people trying new things. I like when people think outside of the box, and again, in the bedroom or in real life, and just try to do new things. So yeah, creativity is something that really gets me going.
What sound or noise do you love?
Probably a lame answer, but a true one. I love hearing my family laughing, and you know, my daughter has probably one of the greatest laughs in the world. She gets it. It's like a hybrid of my wife's and mine, but my son has a great one too. So hearing them laughing in the house is probably my favorite thing in the world.
Now, this might not make him laugh, but it might make me laugh. Hey, what is your favorite curse word?
Oh, it's easy. It's fuck. It's a great one. You can't get a better word. Like it has so many different meanings, but at the same time, it's got those such satisfying, you know, hard syllables. You know, it can be something that blows your mind. Fuck. It can be something that, you know, angers you. Fuck. You know, it's perfect. It's a perfect word.
Yeah, it's pretty perfect, man. But hey, what profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
I've done so many. Because I'm one of those people that if I want to try something, I just go do it. I don't wait. So I've done everything from radio to like working farms to digging graves to wrestling to comedy, so TV. If I didn't have my job, I always wanted to be a movie trailer editor, someone who just made movie trailers, because I love that idea that you can take a film, and especially it happens so much these days where they take a film and they make a trailer that's for a completely different film. Like you can, and somebody way back when the first Transformers movie was coming out, there was a guy who, to prove the point, edited the trailer in 5 different ways with different music and different lighting and different effects and stuff. And he made it like a horror movie, he made it a rom-com, made it a drama, made it a period piece. Like he made all these different edits with the same footage. And that, I love that aspect, that you can make people feel different with the way you edit something. So yeah, probably a movie trailer editor.
Man, the one thing that gets me about movie trailers is sometimes they edit these trailers together with footage that's not even in the movie.
Oh, and that happens so much these days. The push to try to get buzz happening and some viral marketing happening means that they'll spoil the movie. They'll put shit that's purposely misleading. But I mean, even when we were kids, that happened. I remember they used to make, like, I remember when Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom was coming out, they made a trailer for the movie that had nothing to do with the movie, just the concept of Indiana Jones. And it was like, you know, I think it was the Boulder. It was like, but no Harrison Ford. It was obvious that Harrison Ford was not in this trailer. And it was it had like the Boulder, which is the wrong movie. It had a guy picking up a hat, picking up the whip, and it was like, the adventure continues, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. And I'm like, it had nothing to do with the fucking movie. Like, they did the same thing. I think it was Batteries Not Included, which was like a kids film that I quite liked from when I was a kid. All the movies, the trailers for that had nothing to do with the movie. But yeah, it's a interesting world.
Yeah, there's some really clever editors out there, man. But last of the Lipton 6, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
And in this corner from Hartford, Connecticut, weighing 309, you know, I'd love a big entrance, you know, the world heavyweight champion, Scott Black. Yeah, I want immediately heaven to be an Armageddon 6-way highway Hell in a Cell match for the WWE title, and it'd be like me, Michaels, who I'm hoping will be dead at that stage before me, and you know, like and Macho Man and Kurt Hennig, Mr. Perfect, and you know, who else would be dead at that stage that I quite like? I don't think Finn Balor will be. I hope not. He's younger than I am. But anyway, I want heaven to essentially be a nerd playground where I get to be with all the people I love, but also get to do the things I love. I also wouldn't mind. Weirdly, I also wouldn't mind getting to heaven and somebody going, "Look, it's your bird, it's your plane, it's Superman," and that would be sick. Be my entire afterlife being Superman.
Yeah, no, I think that would be a lot of people's dreams, man, but definitely be well suited given your fandom. But hey, man, we're about to hit this nitrous into overdrive. We're about to slam on that pedal Vin Diesel style. We're about to drive our asses straight towards that finish line before riding off into the sunset. So I'm going to hit you with what I call the final four before we call it a day here. Okay. So, Scott, was there ever a point in your life where you stopped and thought, hey, man, this isn't going to work. This whole thing, this might not be for me?
No, every day.
Okay.
I think if you don't have doubt in everything that you do, and if you're one of those people that thinks, I've got this, I'm perfect, immediately everyone overshoots you. So I always say you stay hungry, and you always try to be better today than you were yesterday. Better today than you were yesterday. So I'm constantly in doubt if I'm raising the kids right, if I'm doing best here, if I'm doing the right thing. So it's just always pushing me to be better. So, yeah, no, I feel that every day.
Well, to spin off that question, have you ever stopped and thought, man, how the hell did I get here?
Every day.
Yeah.
I always thought I'd be dead at 25, so I've always thought I'm living on borrowed time. And it wasn't for any wish. It was just kind of that's where I thought my life was heading. So, no, if you would have told little old me in Connecticut, Winstead, Connecticut, when I was 10, that I'd be living in Australia with a wonderful family and a good group of friends, I'd be like, yeah, okay, where's Australia? Is that where Arnold Schwarzenegger's from? Because I was dumb as a kid. And so, yeah, no, my life has definitely taken a really strange turn.
Well, to spin off your answer there, which is interesting, man, because you're thinking, hey, at 25, I'm going to call it a day. You weren't, maybe you weren't in the best place mentally or emotionally at that point, but this question might be able to sort of get a grasp on that because, you're thinking at 25, I'm going to clock out, but maybe earlier on, especially when you're starting your wrestling journey, did you ever think earlier on in your life, getting to this age that you're at now, did you ever think this is where you'd be?
No, not in a million years. I probably thought I'd probably just get some factory job and, I thought I'd be married or something like that. Or at least I always hoped for it. But I didn't think I'd be married to the perfect person for me and have great kids and great job and be in an amazing part of the world. But yeah, it's definitely weird, and I'm very grateful.
Well, man, we reached the last of the final four. This is the final question. You may have already just touched on it there. I'm going to ask it anyway. Currently, what is your proudest moment or achievement?
I'd have to say just, being a dad, I think. Being a family man is probably the happiest I've ever been doing anything, and I've done so many creative things. But I guess I also say that even if it ends tomorrow, and with the current world it might, I don't have any regrets. And that's where I always advise everyone, whether I'm giving advice to wrestlers or comedians or anybody, is like, life is too short. And I don't think there's anything else after this world. And even if there is, I don't know. So I would rather live my life to the fullest now and worry about the repercussions later. But the fact is like, go out and do that thing. If you've been putting something off for years, stop putting it off. Go do it. Have no regrets. Get to the end of your life and go, and someone goes, is there anything you really wanted to do? You can kind of go, no, I'm good. And at this moment, I could say, no, I'm good. I've done everything I wanted to do. Except now I haven't, because with kids, you always have the next thing. It's like, well, I want to see them have kids, and I want to see them get married, and so I haven't done everything. But, so I've still got things to go forward. So don't say I'm just going to go take that bottle of pill and drain it down with some hand sanitizer.
Yeah, no, stay away from those Tide Pods, man. But hey, we've shared your journey here today. Your start of your media career, start of your wrestling career, coming over here to Australia, your Australian wrestling journey all the way up until we met each other and all the work that we've done together, and hell, even the work that we continue to do to get together to this day. The global situation notwithstanding, it'd be good to get back out there either on the road or behind this camera or hell, even sitting next to you with a microphone, recapping our stories and our crazy, crazy moments together. You speak about being grateful, man. I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for everything that you've done for me and the opportunities that you've given, not only myself, but dozens of local Brisbane artists, performers, you name it. There was a platform there and you made sure that everyone got their moment to shine. So, Scott, thank you so much for everything that you've done, man.
My pleasure, buddy. And it was good to have you on the journey, and I look forward to many more with you.
Thank you, man. And before we hit the road, where can people find you and link to that match? So where can we hit you up on the socials?
Yeah, so on social medias, you can find me at Mr. Scott Black on pretty much everything. I think on Instagram it's The Scott Black because some asshole took Mr. Scott Black and ruined the perfectness. But you can always just go to MrScottBlack.com and all the links will be there. Awesome, man. Again, thank you so much for the history that we've had together, man. It's been a crazy, crazy 12 years. And hey, I'm looking forward to the next 12, man. I love you like a brother. I can't wait to see you again once all this craziness is over. Stay safe, and thank you again for coming on, man. No worries, man. My pleasure. See ya. So there you have it. A little bit of Late Night Show history there with Scott Black. It was great to touch base with him again. Great to have a little chat, a little catch-up, and share his wrestling journey and his life journey. I want to thank you all again for tuning into this podcast, Little Man Big Conversations. Hey, if you haven't done so already, please hit up Little Man Big Conversations on Facebook at LMBC Podcast, and on Instagram at LMBC Podcast, and on Twitter at LMBC_podcast. There's plenty more episodes to come. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next week.